music industry who are interested in more on the music business side of things. But I got started doing this work about 5 years ago. I started just calling people up who had music commissions and finding out what exactly a music commission was and why it was important for the States or why it was important for any city to have one. And I was kind of swept into a world of research that was happening, and it's just now becoming more popularized what's going on. So in Columbus, Ohio, I started as a musician, actually. And when you think about music cities and music city development, music commissions, there's really only two ways to do it in an infinite amount of mixtures in between. So it's top-down or bottom-up. And for me, when I was doing this work, I was just a musician. I didn't have government on my side to fund the arts or to fund a music commission. And so I began by starting from the bottom up. And what I did was, I played about 150 shows a year as a musician. I signed a publishing deal in Nashville as a songwriter, and I started learning from really awesome composers that I got really lucky getting in the same room with. And producer of Shaka Khan, the songwriter for the Futurama theme song on TV. Some of these guys are making $20 million a year in royalties, have alpacas in their backyards in Santa Barbara, and they're just collecting while musicians are struggling. And so I got really kind of confused about what all was going on in the industry, and I started asking more questions. As I asked more questions, I started meeting more people, ended up opening up for the Lumineers, 21 Pilots from my city. But I was doing all of this as an artist while iTunes was still alive. Downloads were still hot. You know, I sold 3,000 albums on iTunes, and that was great for a 19-year-old kid running around the US. You know, it was good money. But now 3,000 downloads could very well be 3,000 streams, and streams are 0.0013 cents per stream, while downloads were $10. So it's about maybe 100,000% difference in value that's happening from an album download versus a stream. So I was doing bottom up as a musician right when the industry was pretty solid. My friend Derek Sivers ended up selling CD Baby right before the industry changed. And CD Baby was the one way you could distribute your music onto iTunes at the time. And then more and more distributors came out, more and more companies. And I'm really simplifying this, but the big picture here is the industry was changing. People were moving out of it, and hands were trading, and all of a sudden you see download growth completely drop through the bottom, as we've all seen at conferences, panels, heard, researched. You know the industry has changed. So within all this change, the industry broke. And I was looking at this career as an artist like, okay, so how do I make money now as an artist? Classic thing that's going on right now. So that was about 4 years ago. I started meeting with people in the music industry in Los Angeles. So this guy is Steven Finfer. He represents Miley Cyrus, Green Day, Jonas Brothers. And I literally just told him that I had a documentary, and had a bunch of buddies with DSLR cameras up here in his living room, and we filmed him and interviewed him. And I asked him questions about how he does music publishing with Carrie DiGuardi, and went down the street to his former partner from Bug Music and talked to David Hirschland from Sony BMG Chrysalis. We did create a documentary, and it isn't bad, but we didn't really know what we were doing, and we were really just trying to find out how the industry had changed and how that relates to what was happening in our city, which was Columbus, Ohio. And so from these conversations, I got the same thing that everybody said, you know, that all these musicians, to do music today, you really have to move to Los Angeles. You really have to move to Austin, if you're talking to somebody from Austin. You really have to move to Nashville, if you're talking to somebody from Nashville. You really have to move to fill in the blank city, you know? It was really just everybody saying, hey, just come to our city. And I'm like, hey, why would you want musicians to come to your city? This is interesting. What's the value of a musician? What's the value of creative class? What is this new book, The Rise of the Creative Class? Why has he published several different versions of The Rise of the Creative Class? What is the value of an artist? And why am I even valuable on this journey? What is going on? So instead of moving to a different city, I decided to just say, well, I'm valuable. The musicians in my city are valuable. And so I started a nonprofit. And it started off with 25 songwriters. And then 25 songwriters, just the friends that I knew, I was like, great, we got the whole city. And then 5 years later, there's 450 songwriters in our organization. It's like the largest in the Midwest, which is great. But it started with one nonprofit, and as we started growing, I ended up opening up a music venue that you see in that picture there. And, you know, we had an investment of about, I don't know, it's like $3.2 million for this venue, which is great. because we had so many songwriters that wanted to perform shows. We had all this talent. And we had a community of people who were coming out to see these songwriters. They ended up being people who also wanted to buy food and beer and fund a venue. So we funded one, and then we funded another one, and then I helped launch festivals in my city. And then 50,000 emails later of email addresses on lists, which isn't a lot, but it's a good number. You know, it's a small publication, I guess. We were able to get corporate sponsors for some of the events we were doing. And then we looked at the whole thing, we're like, wait, this is kind of a music scene that we have. It's a pocket, it's our pocket, but it's a scene. And so we started using these corporate sponsorships and these emails in the community to bring people out to events. So that's where How to Build a Music City came from. Before I get too far into the events, while all this growth was happening, I was still referencing industry experts. I was still talking to people on the phone, still trying to get, advice from composers who had worked on these TV shows and understand what was happening in Los Angeles. Even though it didn't relate to my city, even though it had nothing to do with our community, it was insight about how the industry was changing as it could relate to how a city could grow. And so I started looking up, what is a music city? What is this thing everybody's talking about? Is our city in Columbus, Ohio a music city? Because we have venue, does that mean that we're a music city? Because we have this network of performers, are we a music city? And like many of you know, I started finding out stuff about Nashville. You got Music Row. Google would tell me about Tin Pan Alley in New York. It would tell me about the live music capital of the world, Austin. The search results just kept coming back about Hollywood. But then the more I dug into it, the more I found other music cities like Kingston with reggae and ska, like El Salvador with samba, like Detroit, Motown. Does that make Detroit a music city today? Is it still a music city? What is going on? I mean, what is a music city? So it's been cool to see the digital age kind of give rise to this independent artist that's almost like changing what a music city could be, It used to be a music city was where the recording studios and the publishing houses and the venues were, and now, an independent artist can do it from anywhere. But an independent artist can also just make a ton of money from anywhere, literally. I mean, you can make a living at it. You saw some of these artists up here on this panel earlier. Mewash is an amazing hip-hop artist in Katowice, making his living as an independent artist globally. He is his own kind of music city in a lot of ways, but still, from Katowice, has brought so much power and energy back to this region as an independent artist. So you start to look at musicians as vessels that help to grow the notoriety of their cities as they're improving their lives, which hasn't that always been the case? But when did we start associating music cities? It just started happening. So when you look at the digital age for artists, you start thinking about these different ways they're making money, and you start to wonder how a city's role could affect those different ways that an artist could make money, right? You look at synchronization, licensing. What's the role of a city getting involved with that? You look at marketing. What's the role of a city in marketing an artist's career? Isn't that supposed to be labels, or is it a music city's job? You start thinking about all these different ways that artists are making money, and you start wondering what the role of a city is in helping those artists make money, especially as the industry continues to decline and change. Who is going to put a stop to this? What's going to change the industry? What's going to actually make an impact? Are we just going to cancel our dreams out and be like, we're done with this music thing? Or is it time to find new partnerships and new cities that could come up and support these scenes that are growing and support the musicians' lives, while the musicians' lives are adding value back to the cities? So this was the vision I started seeing. And as I was asking this question, I just finally got sick and tired of it, and I said, I'm not going to just be the one that's warring over this myself. So I started an event called How to Build a Music City as a question. And we brought together about 400 musicians on our first event that were there to just have that discussion with people from the music industry who wanted to answer that question. So we brought in a guy from Music Dealers at the time, which is a licensing company that's been defunct. I don't know if you guys heard about this pretty intense crash. But we had several industry representatives. We had this really awesome lady from CSAC in New York City. We could only get it from the States because, it's like a small budget event, but I didn't expect 400 musicians to turn up. But they did. And we all asked, are we a music city? And we basically said, yeah, we think we are. And so that event led to even more events where we started asking the community, after we got this list of feedback from the musicians after the first event, we said, so if we're a music city, how do you want the city to support you? What exactly do you want to do? And what do you want the city to do for you? And we just started surveying. We collected, I think it was over 200 surveys after all 3 of these events were done. But we went to bars, we went to this big movie theater, put on this huge event, all these musicians came out. Local radio station owner was coming out and speaking, a local director of the music school from our university was moderating a panel. And the same questions were like, okay, so what do you guys want to see Columbus do? Here's what's happening in the industry, here's what's happening globally, what do you want your city to do? And so we started asking other cities what they had done too, and we brought them in for the discussion. We said, just like the Katowice Music Center, we said, what's working in your city? And it wasn't just government people who were showing up, and it wasn't just music industry people. It was literally the artists that are living and working and trying to create every single day. And they're in Columbus, they came out and learned from these people and said, I think that's nice that you said that, but actually I have a better idea. And then they'd write it down. So from these events, we developed a bit of a task force that you see on stage there. It was musicians who represented different genres of the scene. It was government people who represented tourism, arts, and tourism, arts, and the mayor's office and the city council. And then it was also corporate people who were like representing large company, medium-sized company, small business, studios and venues. All of those together in the same room, family coming home from Christmas kind of feel. And together they made up about 90 people in the music scene who wanted to refine these community ideas down to about, from 20 down to 10. So what we learned in the process is, if you can see it down there, it's just never build alone. If you're gonna launch a music city, or if you're gonna try to grow a scene, or if you're even gonna be a musician and just make money as a musician, you can't do it alone. There's no sense in like warring over all these questions yourself. You really have to combine and collaborate with people to figure out solutions for these things. Locally, nationally and globally, I think building together is really the answer for a lot of this. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the solutions or some of the benefits that have come from this, which is from doing it from the bottom up, we've had a huge volunteer base. I'm not sure if you heard on our panel earlier, but we have about 100 volunteers engaged and it's growing. We get emails every week right now of people that want to participate. We're trying to find things for them to do. So that's a good problem to have when you worry about staffing something like this. That's the fear, right? I'm going to have to put a bunch of people to work and it's going to be a huge paycheck. If your community really wants it and they've already given you their ideas, they say they want it, well, once you actually get it together and you say, okay, this is what we're going to do, the people who said they want it, I think a lot of them are going to show up and actually be passionate about the work that's to come. At least that's what we found in Columbus. And so far, all of those volunteers have actually broken into committees that are, they're all delegated a specific program within the commission. So every committee functions around a program. It's a pretty basic organization, but if you have 20 people on a team getting a program done, it's actually pretty sweet in terms of cost and pretty decent in terms of effectiveness. These volunteers aren't all professionals either. We had like a musician right there using a whiteboard for the first time. But he was really good, and he's an audio engineer. He's incredibly smart. Like, I don't think we give people enough credit sometimes for their ability to use a marker on a board, you know? But he was really effective at leading people, and he's grown as a leader in the scene because of his engagement with the government. So the volunteers has also done a great thing in dissolving fear in the government. You know, a lot of musicians are always thinking of anti-system, against the man. That's how it's been since Nirvana, or probably before. I mean, rock and roll has always been a thing in USA where it's like you're kind of against the man. But when you actually see the benefits of government collaborating with the people, you realize that, you know, your local government, your local city government is not the man. So it actually does a beautiful thing in helping collaboration happen, not only like economically for benefits, but culturally and socially as well. Let's see. The task force, it kept growing over time, but we now have an advisory board and a board of directors. So we've structured it traditionally like a nonprofit in the USA. And what that means is the board of directors are voting, and they all get a vote in what happens programmatically. So far, our board of directors has been like 98% in the same voting every single time, so not a lot of like deflection just yet. But the advisory board is just an annual meeting of about 90 people right now that have some sort of music industry involvement. They might not even live in Columbus anymore, but we have like the guys from the Rascal Flatts, like the mastering engineer of the Black Keys, he's from Columbus. So these guys just started joining our advisory board, and they advise the board of directors. Sometimes they say really assaulting things that really help our board to be like, yeah, you know what, you're really smart, you live in LA, and you're right. So we've kind of taken advice from our advisory board while also still rolling and functioning as a volunteer community. There's a lot of research that goes into this stuff, I'm sure you know. There's all these publications, benchmark studies. Some of those publications are actually helping cities to attract global recognition for the accomplishments they've had. At the same time, a lot of these are actually reports cities could start referencing and using as opposed to hiring a consultancy to come in and do that work. On the other hand, you might want to hire a consultancy to come in and do some of this work. So everybody from, I've seen Ernst & Young all the way down to, not down, but side by side to P&G or Sound Diplomacy or Sound Music Cities or myself. We've gone into cities and helped them to strategize their planning so that they can effectively launch an organization that supports the music community, or sometimes develop an organization that's already been supporting the music community. And this is what our strategic plan kind of looked like when we were pitching. It shouldn't be 90 pages in my opinion. It should be 1 or 2 rocks, and how are you going to use those rocks to build something. That way, if you have a one-page sheet that your board of directors is always referencing, you're going to stay on the same page and eliminate confusion. For our strategic plan, we bucketed the 10 things, the 10 programs we're going to start using in our city, and we put them into 3 big buckets of like marketing the scene, serving the musicians, and growing the venue business. And that was just based on a SWOT that we did, like a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. We did a SWOT to kind of understand where our city was positioned, and then align these programs based on our strengths and our opportunities. We kind of threw our weaknesses and threats out the window and said we're just going to focus on what we do best. So right now we have a lot of music technology happening. We have a lot of marketing for our music scene happening through our partners on our board. We reached, I don't know, I think maybe 500,000 people with the message of music in the last 3 months. So a lot of reach, and then in terms of engagement, we've grown pretty dramatically, pretty quickly because of the community effort that's around this thing. So we have about, I think, maybe 5,000 or 10,000 people engaged on our social just after about 3 months of active marketing once we launched that program. And we're going to be supporting music conferences by bringing in supervisors that are going to be checking out bands while they're performing in festivals, trying to align the bands with licensing opportunities. I'm not going to go into all of these, but just know that I think in terms of programmatic development, it doesn't have to be crazy. But when you're developing your pitch for a music commission, you're going to have letters of support from a bunch of organizations that want to just get behind you and show their support of what you're doing. Those letters of support are so crucial to actually raising money in a city that doesn't have a lot of arts funding. It's amazing what happens when somebody writes some words and signs their name. So that could be a really good tactic. There's a timeline, work to date, another tool that we use for our pitch. And when you start looking at the federal funding for music in the USA, it's just kind of crazy. There's a lot of benefit in living in Europe. I'll just say that. I mean, I don't even mean talking politically about our current regime that's happening right now. But I think there's a lot of benefit in living in Europe in terms of how the arts are looked at. And I think it comes with, you know, we haven't earned it in the USA. We really haven't earned federal funding for our culture because we've only been around for 250 years. So I'm not sure in terms of heritage, yes, we've had some major movements in the USA, I won't dog that, but we don't have thousands of years of history and thousands of years of culture that we're trying to preserve. It's a couple hundred years old, so, you know, don't want to look like the brat at the table, the young kid in the global community, but I think we do have a long way to go in terms of supporting our arts in the USA, and especially considering our economy and our population size. I hope we start to wise up and provide some more dollars for some of these music commissions to start to pop up in the USA. Until then, it's going to happen from private-public partnerships. It's going to happen from the local government, and it's going to happen from the swells of community that go to the table in the right ways, with the right questions, and ask. After doing some work, this is what our board launch looked like. Columbus Music Commission. Okay, that was literally just step 1. So you get through all that and you're like, all right, now we got to actually do something. So all of these cities did this a long time ago. Okay, we were not the first to the table. This has been popularized around the world. It's starting to become a thing. But there are so many cities that already have offices in place that have already figured out how to culturally, programmatically support music. And we kind of followed in our own direction. We're learning from some of these other cities that have it. So the construction begins, and what does it look like? You launch a music office, and Music Canada put out an incredible infographic that looks at the various components of a music scene and then helps you to sort of organize it. So this isn't going to be something you can actually like look on this presentation and be like, oh, I get it. But if you go and actually like download this and spend a couple minutes with it, you'll start to see how they've mapped out the different components of a music scene and how a music office can actually hit the core to affect the broader concentric circle there. So it's a really cool infographic that we've used when building our foundation. But simplifying this concentric circle model that Music Canada put together, the foundation here is really musicians, venues, and this concept of music is valuable. If you have that happening in your city, musicians, venues, and the concept of music is valuable, you can build programmatic support to support your scene. You can actually go and raise money and you can make this happen, I do believe. So the foundation starts with musicians, venues, music is valuable. From the musicians, it's about educating and developing that scene. From the venues, it's about educating, developing that audience. From the music is valuable thing, it's about time to have some music business go with it. It can't just be a concept, you gotta turn that into actual dollars. So you start to build this music office around these things. Okay, you're trying to, again, educate those musicians, develop that music base, provide them support, resources. For the venues, you're trying to help them market, you're trying to develop audiences. And then, again, for the music is valuable thing, you're talking about not only past ways of doing music business, but maybe even future ways of doing music business. That's what an office is there to support, just at its core for our city. So you can basically consider the bricks as the programs, and basically the musicians, venues, and music is valuable thing as the music scene, okay? So you start to do programmatic development for the music scene to help it grow. From this, you're gonna get all these different tactics, like, okay, now we have these programs, so we need a marketing strategy for audience growth, we need spaces and events, we need to advocate for policies and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But your tactics, it's really just this long to-do list that goes back to that core of foundation and bricks and mortar there, the scene and the programs. The real end goal here is cultural, social, and economic growth. So every time you're building one of these music commissions or an office, or you're even aligning a program, it should fit one of these end goals of this is either helping culture grow, it's helping the community come together socially, or it's driving actual real tangible value economically. And we're gonna be able to prove that through this metric. So in terms of building the foundation, going back to it, musicians, venues, music is valuable. The number one barrier to growth is struggling musicians. Okay, so everybody knows about this, but earnings can affect your foundation, how much money the musicians are earning, business skills or industry knowledge, networking and collaboration, lack of access to resources. All these things hold back a musician. So there are solutions for each one of these things. For earnings, you can have music technology that helps musicians do better music business. You can also provide them grants, funding them directly. One music technology that we're building in Columbus is called License Local. And this is an idea of getting the city's marketing agencies and getting the people who are making independent films in Columbus and getting the wedding videographers and the corporate entities to start licensing their music from local artists. It's not a crazy concept. It's like we did a survey of 88 agencies and we found that they were getting the majority of their music from Chicago, LA, or New York. Why? We have so much of it in Columbus. Well, you guys never organized it. Well, we have now. Well, make it easier for us to buy it. We did. So I just did about 40 licensing placements in the last 3 months in Columbus for artists that have never gotten a sync deal in their life. So this technology is starting to pick up. We're testing it. We're working out all the kinks. But once this is there, we see this as a way, I see this as a way for cities to start helping to pay their musicians out of sync fees that are happening in their city already. Or maybe even for cities like Krakow, Katowice, Warsaw, to start exporting their music to the US for licensing opportunities that they didn't currently get. If it was going through a city network, it might actually lead to some clients. So there's a lot of companies that own the space. There's a lot of big business that happens around this through like major labels like Sony, and you gotta climb this ladder and stop all that. Let's just go back to an ecosystem locally and let's start doing business locally again. So I think this is one way that a government could actually advocate. You know, the Chamber of Commerce could say, hey, members, get your music locally. If our government gets around that, if our chamber does it, it promotes the businesses that are licensing their music from local musicians. All of a sudden people are like, yeah, there's no difference for me. It's the same commercial, it's the same video, just different sound behind it. As long as the music is quality, it works. And this is a $2.5 billion market. It's growing every single year by about 6 or 7% globally. So sync is still relevant, but not a lot of people are jumped into it yet. So the other thing is like grants. They actually have a really great grant system in Katowice right now. They're starting to do online submissions, have a evaluation that's really transparent, and doing community outreach to make sure those musicians know that those grants are available. You got those three components, you can start really supporting musicians in valuable ways and measuring your impact. Business skills or interesting knowledge. And I'm going to quickly run through these because I know it's the end of the day. I'm not going to keep speaking at you guys, and we'll have time for questions. But you know, you can do workshops. You can educate musicians. You can also do an online musician's desk reference is a cool tool that musicians can use to like track the growth in their music career, and it has tons of resources about all the different elements of the music industry, as scribed by one of the most brainiac, boring, and awesome dudes I know. So he really sat down and did all the hard work around this, and you can track your progress towards your goal as a musician using musician's desk reference. Difficult to network, you can start an association. Austin Music People is one. We also have Columbus Songwriters. Associations are commonplace in cities already. It doesn't really have to come from a music office, but it's a nice solution for a scene if you don't already have one. Lack of access to resources, local directory. Again, this is all the music reporters in your city, maybe not even the music reporters, the people that should be reporting on music, listed, their public emails listed on a directory so musicians can send them press releases. You know, getting your musicians start to like teed up to like doing their own marketing is so key, I think, for that scene to grow. It's going to happen naturally, but you can also kind of speed up the process. Barriers to growth. The second barrier to growth, struggling musicians, struggling venues. In terms of revenue, audience attraction, retaining those audiences so they keep coming back, and then maybe partnerships that actually help them to reduce their costs or grow their revenue as well. Solutions for this, you can do unique shows, and Katowice has done some really cool shows. Hip Hop History is a really cool YouTube video. Check it out. It was an event. Genre fusion, popular songs restyled. The videography on this was amazing, so they documented this unique event. It's really helped them to grow the audience of their performance space. In terms of attraction, social marketing, just the core basics. I find that a lot of venues aren't even using like marketing automation. Who knows what marketing automation is? Okay, I'm sorry. So marketing automation, I love you guys. It's like how you schedule posts. So like instead of writing the post in real time and then posting it, it would take so much work. Do it all on the same day, and then it goes out for the next year. Like if you know your calendar ahead of time, you can literally be scheduling all of your promotions in like 1 or 2 days, and then go do all the other things that you have to do in managing your venue. But many venues aren't even using this, and it's like what, $50 a month to use Buffer, and MailChimp is free, so you can do 2,000 emails on MailChimp and you can schedule those out. It's just simple, basic marketing stuff. And that's where MailChimp comes into play. 80% of tickets actually convert through email. It's a fact. It's a weird stat, but it's a fact. It's Pareto. But using email to actually send out your promotions for your shows could literally help your venue do twice the amount of business that it did last year. If you don't have an email list, what are you doing? I mean, I recently went into a venue in our city and I increased their sales this year by 45% by doing really dumb, basic social marketing and email marketing that was like saving them time on the management that they would need to actually like run their shows. So marketing is just so key. Collaboration, I guess one of the more unique things we've done in Columbus is a music venues co-op. So getting all the music venues together into its own kind of committee, task force, and saying, why don't you guys decide what you need and then communicate that back to our music office? We're not going to tell you how to run your business. Tell us how we can support you in running your business. And we've gotten some good feedback from that. We had a couple of venue owners in our city just, I'll be the guy that brings all the venues together. And then they started meeting together and just saying, based on our needs right now, we really just need a bus. that is devoted to going around to all the venues at night. It's going to be the night music bus, or whatever we want to call it, the C music bus, the C bus music, I don't know. But it's going to go around to all the different venues, and it's going to drop people off, and they're going to go to shows, and it's going to be devoted to that. The tourism department is like, we have a bus hanging out we don't even use. So it just, I mean, basic requests from a co-op can go a long way. It's collaboration. Music here is not valuable. That's the last barrier to growth. Again, foundations, musicians, venues, and music is valuable as your foundation. If music is not valuable, you're going to have some sort of a pessimistic vibe issue that's holding you back. It's something that's just saying, we don't believe in ourselves. We're not confident. You know, how do you actually solve that, the vibe issue? You start getting opinion leaders, people in your scene that have already had success, talking about the success they're having. It's really basic, but it needs to be organized. Having those friends, those advocates on your side to build music scene confidence, and then teaming them up to do it, promoting their success stories, is so key for building confidence. Cultural issue and professional industry, like maybe there's a lot of professionals in your city that aren't going to see shows. If you have a strong board that actually has some clout into the professional industry, you can do several different things to get corporate partnerships in your events. That might give discounted tickets, or might have tickets donated back to a nonprofit. So every time an employee goes to a show, it actually does something good for the community outside of music. So building those programs so that employees feel good about going to shows, not just for the music, but maybe for something else that kind of scratches their itch, it'll get them exposed to the art so they can kind of keep coming back to it. You want to make a social issue out of this, because cultural issues are so much harder to fix than social issues. So again, change that cultural issue of, I don't really like music, to a social issue of, I went to the show and it supported a cause I really believe in, that's why I like music. Okay? I'll just go through a couple more of these. Here's something new as well that's coming out of Columbus in terms of getting people to like music and getting exposed to music. We created Lamp Amp. So you literally plug into a light post and then you start playing and you get amplified. Lamp Amp. It was dumb, but it seems to be really effective because every neighborhood in our city so far wants it. And we literally just sent a lead sheet out and they were like, how do we get this? And it's family friendly, it's communal, but it can be extremely effective. I know musicians who busked in Chicago and made about $400 a day just street performing. So I mean, if you don't mind your office being a sidewalk, it's not a bad gig. And I think most musicians are ready to kind of take that plunge and maybe even use a rehearsal with a public performance. So this is going to be like a closed access system, so you have the control over who can get access to that microphone, that amplifier. You don't want people like Bullhorn guy on the street, you know, doing his thing. So closed access system, you kind of swipe a card. It could be just the same as a parking meter if you really wanted to charge for it. But mostly this is going to be funded by neighborhood districts and city government. And we've patented this, so if you've already started wheels turning because it's really dumb, I agree with you, but it's kind of already off the market. But if your city wants it, I mean, we're looking for more collaborations and we want to expand this technology out. So once you've done all this stuff, it's kind of like the next step is share it, like I'm doing today. You know, we've done 3 panels at South by Southwest. I'm more of a musician than I am maybe a professional government or something. But I think sometimes just going out and speaking to people and sharing ideas, so you'll find that, you know, if you're doing cool things in your city or if you really believe in your city, there's something that everybody can kind of feel and take away from that. So we're kind of all in this together in a lot of ways, and collaboration is so key. So if you have any questions, I know you do, go ahead and ask them, and I'll just go ahead and make sure I'm not missing anything else. That's it. Are you going to applause? I see applause, sorry. You can applaud. Thanks. So what questions do you have? Beck?
How do you set the price point for the licensing?
Price point? So it's determined. There's a lot of industry standard stuff that's going on with licensing. We're going to be in the same boat as industry standard. But you can determine the price of licensing by 7 components of a license that make up a legal agreement. So it's like the project use. Like, is this going to be on website only, or is this going to be broadcast? Like, that's one aspect, one variable of computing a license fee. The other one is the terms of use. You know, is this an exclusive or non-exclusive? Exclusive is ridiculously expensive compared to a non-exclusive agreement. And so as they go through these different, as they want to check out a license, a lot of labels know as well, as they want to check out a license, they'll be populating this legal agreement by selecting what variations of that agreement they want. It's very traditional to a lot of the other licensing companies that are on the internet right now, except this is going to be marketed and geared towards government use as opposed to industry use. It also might serve many labels who are trying to get their music licensed as well, so there's some partnership components to it as well. But yeah, it's industry standard and made up from different categories. Seth, I want you to ask me a question about the licensing. I want you to challenge me on this because I see it.
No, I have no challenge. I was running through to make sure I hadn't screwed anything up in our licenses recently.
Oh, okay.
No, not at
Here's
all.
the head shakes.
So I was sitting there, I was like, exclusive, non-exclusive. No, I would never give someone an exclusive over any of our music. I mean, unless they wanted to pay an outrageous fee.
50 grand to Coca-Cola.
Sure, well,
Yeah.
Why stop at 50? What are you kidding me? Private school tuition goes up next year. No, I didn't challenge. I frankly, as I sat back, it was such an easy. I mean, I think I'm not. I hope I'm not putting words into your mouth.
No.
Such an easy, straight ahead thought, but such an insightful one to say. Of course, go to your local community, your local city. In New York, you know, again, it's because it's such a place where so many people are already looking. But yeah, if you were outside of Europe, why wouldn't you go and say local business, support local musicians? What's the difference?
And here's the truth, is you're not trying to get the whole $2.5 billion market. That'll never happen. But you might get the breadcrumbs off the side that still make up $100 million. It might be a lot of value that goes back to local independent musicians who wouldn't otherwise see that money. So there's a lot left on the table. Any other questions? Yeah.
I've got a question. You talked about, you know, varied genres, but you talked quite a lot about songwriters. I mean, how broad is the constituency of music that you have?
In Columbus?
Yes, in Columbus.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, I think we have 1,500 bands we've logged in the directory. So it goes from jazz to neo-soul to, you know, blues rock. We have a blues rock organization in our city. We have tons of rock and roll bands that play festivals. I would say classically though, Poland has us beat by far. We don't have a lot of classically trained musicians because of our institutional system being quite different. You have to pay a lot of money to go to music school. So our government doesn't really support that. But we do have a symphony orchestra in our city. We also have a jazz orchestra in our city. The venue that I helped launch does a lot of jazz music. We have international jazz players that hold down a regular weekly, you know, Sunday jam, Sunday church kind of thing, you know. And it's really soulful, and we pair that with really great food, so it kind of works. Yeah, we have all genres. I mean, we also have a really intense punk scene that I don't hang out in. Because I think you find a lot of the punk rock that's left over from the 70s or 80s doesn't really like this concept of music city support or music building. And they're kind of a different breed that you gotta kind of work with a little bit, but I think that they're certainly a part of the scene and they need to be represented as well, so we have a lot of punk music in Columbus too. Is that it? Cool. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękujemy. Johnny Hendrickson.